Treasurer and Energy Minister Matt Kean. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
I want to start with the energy crisis. The New South Wales Coalition Government's target by 2030 is probably similar to federal Labor's. That requires the electricity grid to be powered by 82% renewables by 2030. How is that achievable?
Well, it's quite easily achievable. What we've done is put in place a policy that will see new generation built into the system at a speed to replace our existing infrastructure. We know our existing coal-fired power stations are reaching the end of their technical lives. And in order to put downward pressure on electricity prices and keep the lights on, you need to build replacement capacity.
I don't want to be too simplistic about this, but what happens when there's not enough sun, not enough wind? Can batteries really do the job? I mean, we haven't really got the technological proof it can work yet, have we?
You're absolutely right. Renewables are weather dependent. That's why they need to be supported with things like pumped storage, like batteries, like new technologies that are emerging around hydrogen, for example. We need to build a modern grid that can keep the lights on and drive prices down. And we've got a plan to do exactly that in New South Wales.
All right, what's your mix in 2030 in terms of the electricity grid? Is it 82% renewables, 10% gas?
We still believe that there'll be coal in the system by 2030. We know that the Mount Piper coal-fired power station is not scheduled to close until 2040. We know that Bayswater at this stage is not scheduled to close until 2033. So there will still be traditional thermal generation in the mix. But what we're doing is planning for the reality that some of those coal-fired plants may come out of the system early. We need to be planning for that because, as we've seen recently with the announcement of Eraring, that coal is becoming less and less reliable, and we need to make sure that we've got the replacement capacity in place if in the event it does come out early.
I do want to ask about this Eraring issue. We've got Liddell shutting, Eraring to shut. Sounds like Snowy Hydro delayed. And also you kind of promised cheaper power bills from renewables. Looks the other way, doesn't it?
No, not at all. I mean, the Eraring coal-fired power station is about 2,900 megawatts of capacity. It's a huge load. What we did was get the best engineers to design our solution to deal with the closure of Eraring. We've come up with an idea, a solution that is essentially building a network battery, which will free up capacity in the existing transmission network so that the existing coal-fired power stations, Vales Point, Mount Piper, Bayswater, can actually pump more load into the system. So think of it like a water pipe. We're actually just freeing up capacity so we can pour more electrons into the system.
But do you admit short-term electricity prices are going to go up? How long is that going to go for?
So in the short term, electricity prices will be going up because of the war in Russia. What we're seeing is that that's pushing up.
That's the only reason?
That's one of the main reasons.
It's not these decaying coal-fired power stations and...
Well, of course, there are a number of reasons that impact electricity prices. But right now, electricity prices are going up because we're relying more on gas to generate our electricity prices. And the price of gas has more than quadrupled since the war in the Ukraine began. So in January, we were paying about $100 per megawatt hour for gas. Today, we're paying $400 per megawatt hour for gas, and that's feeding through to people's bills.
All right, but you're the energy minister, so I feel like the viewers and I can say to you, okay, you've got this great long-term plan. Why weren't you ready for these coal-fired power station shutdowns, an elevation in price where it comes to gas? Why can't you do anything about electricity prices now?
Well, we are doing things about electricity prices now. So, for example...
So why are they still going up?
Well, one of the reasons they're going up is because the coal-fired power plants are becoming less reliable. So at the moment, we've had a number of our generators come offline in an unscheduled manner.
Okay, so what are you doing about prices? When can we see a drop in prices?
So what we're doing about prices is we're speaking to the energy companies to turn the coal-fired power stations back on. If we're putting more coal into the system at the moment and relying less on gas, that will bring downward pressure on prices.
And when will we see that?
But the other things that we can do at the moment, Andrew, are supporting people with their bills. That's why we've announced a number of measures to provide rebates or financial assistance during this period as we get through it. So, for example, we've just announced an increase in our assistance vouchers for low-income households, up from $1,200 to $1,600 to help people deal with the rise in cost of energy. This is a temporary thing, but in the long term, we have a plan that will put massive downward pressure on electricity prices.
All right. Well, I want to ask you about the budget now and your role as Treasurer. Will there be a surplus in the forward estimates?
Well, I'm not going to announce budget numbers today, but this is a Conservative government that's looking to the future, and we're going to manage our finances responsibly.
Could the pre-election spending you're about to do drive up inflation further?
We're focused on making sure that any spending that we're doing is not going to put upward pressure on inflation. So we're investing in things that are going to grow the overall size of the economy rather than provide a short-term sugar hit.
Are you going to continue this push, you and Dominic Perrottet, for phasing out stamp duty and putting in an annual land tax? Will we see that in the budget?
Well, this is, although it's a third-term government, we are still coming up with a positive agenda and fresh ideas. And
But
we're
you've been
looking
talking
at
about
ways.
this for a while, though.
Well, we're looking at ways to ensure that we make it as easy as possible for people to purchase their first home.
Do you need federal money to do this, or can New South Wales do it alone?
New South Wales can do elements of this alone, tax reform alone, but obviously if you want to do comprehensive tax reform in the interests of not only the state of New South Wales, but also the Commonwealth, if more people are buying houses, turning over houses, that's good for the overall size of the economy. So it's in the Commonwealth Government's interest to work with the states to introduce the productivity reforms that are going to set us up for success.
Okay, I think the ACT introduced this, and the land tax bills annually are quite high, however, aren't they? There could be a drawback to this.
Well, we want to make sure that people aren't worse off as a result of tax reform, and that's exactly what we'll focus on. So we'll look at ways to improve the overall size of the economy. We'll look at ways to make the tax system more efficient, but we don't want to penalise those who can least afford it.
Are there too many toll roads in New South Wales?
Look, don't forget, toll roads are one of the ways that we've been able to build essential infrastructure that the state missed out on for generations. We've built the West Connects Tunnel, we've built the North Connects Tunnel, we're building metros, and the reason we're doing that is to improve travel times, reduce congestion, and make it easier for people to get around Sydney.
Do you think there's too many tolls? You did sell Mike Baird sold off the poles and wires. That was $30 billion. Did there need to be this many tolls?
I don't think there's enough infrastructure in New South Wales, and this is a government focused on unlocking new infrastructure, and there are a number of ways we can do that. What we don't want to see is putting upward pressure on the cost of living across New South Wales, and that's why last week I announced that we'll be giving people that use our toll roads a 40% discount on the tolls that they pay. That's one way that New South Wales government is using its budget to work for the people, not the other way around.
Would you consider selling off the rest of the electricity industry, or it's not on the table for the next election?
Well, it's not on the table for the next election. What we're focused on is managing the state's finances responsibly.
Okay. Are you expecting challenges from the Teal candidates, so-called Teal candidates, at the next state election?
Well, we're not going to take anything for granted. We're going to focus on making sure that we deliver for the communities that we represent and deliver for the people of New South Wales. And I think if we're a good government, then that will be recognised no matter where people live.
And it's been printed that you've got a childcare plan which probably addresses some of these electoral concerns. Are you going to sort of top up the Albanese reforms? Is that what you're looking at? Well, assistance for people?
Well, our view is that no woman should have to choose between having a career and having a family. And right now, there are a number of structural barriers in the way of that happening. We know women take on a disproportionately high amount of care responsibilities, particularly in those early years. We want to make sure we're looking at things that will deal with that and give women the same opportunities to participate in our economy as their male counterparts.
Some childcare subsidy then? But I guess the Albanese government's also doing that. So how's it going to work?
Well, the budget's on the 21st of June. We'll have some things to say as we head to that. We're going to make an announcement here today on the Andrew Clennell program.
All right. Well, there was a story in The Australian by Sherry Markson that talked about you texting a Channel 10 reporter trying to get a question to Natalie Ward about Catherine Dees. I assume this is true. Can you take us through what all this is about?
Well, I wouldn't normally comment on private conversations, but because it's in the public domain, all I'll say is that a reporter that worked in the New South Wales Gallery contacted me about a political matter. I responded with some light-hearted banter, but the suggestion that I was asking the reporter to ask questions of anyone in particular is just false.
But doesn't that look like, or it seems from the Morrison camp, there's a belief that you might have been trying to undermine Scott Morrison by suggesting that a question go to Natalie Ward, your ministerial colleague, about the Catherine Dees matter?
Not at all.
She wasn't that happy with the Catherine Dees.
Not at all. I worked hard to ensure the Morrison government was elected. I fundraised, I campaigned in various seats. In fact, the party asked me to write letters to constituents in a whole range of seats, which I happily did. I wanted to see the Morrison government re-elected, and I worked very hard to make that happen.
You didn't like him, though, or you didn't see eye to eye with him often, and he was always having a shot at, or often having a shot at you, wasn't he? I mean, that's fair.
No, that's that's not fair. I mean, I had some differences of opinion with some of my federal colleagues, as I do sometimes with my state colleagues. I believe firmly that we should be standing up to protect our environment. I believe firmly that we should be respecting women and empowering them to make the most of the opportunities this country has to offer. And I'll continue to fight for that. And if that means I have some critics, then so be it.
Did you tell Catherine Cusack, your colleague, that you were Australia's best ever Environment Minister?
No, I certainly didn't. I mean, that's a fiction that was cooked up late at night by Catherine, and she's best placed to speak to that.
All right, just finally, why did Scott Morrison fail at the election in your view, and what lessons will you and Dominic Perrottet take from that to the New South Wales election?
Well, I think the Liberal Party's at its best when we speak to our values of freedom, of enterprise, of opportunity for everyone, regardless of where they live or their gender or their skin colour, all those things. When we stand up for building a strong economy and a secure nation, those values didn't stop talking to the community, but I feel the Liberal Party stopped talking to those values. So we need to get back to our core beliefs, the things that have made this party great, which are also the things that have made our country great. And that's the best way for us to reclaim office and continue to fight to build a stronger, more prosperous country for everyone.
Matt Keane, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.